Welcome back to Quick Bits. This week we are covering breaking news from the end of last week while I was covering the Karen Read trial with regard to P. Diddy and a video that has come to light from 2016. I'm going to talk about that real briefly. And then into week 3 of the Karen Read trial, and we are maybe getting to the point in time where the prosecution thinks that Karen Read hit John O'Keefe with her car. And we'll get to that in just a minute. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. This is the Quick Bits, where I break down just the main points of the pop culture and entertainment cases I'm currently covering on YouTube and the Emily Show podcast. Let's get into it. While I'm covering the Karen Read trial, the best place for you to stay up to date on the witnesses taking the stand and other things happening in the cases that I'm covering is in the Lume app. It is free on iOS and Android and is the best way to stay in the loop because life gets busy. I also let you know when each of these episodes drop so that if you missed something, you still have the overview. On Friday, May 17th, a video was released by CNN that shows P. Diddy assaulting Cassie Ventura. Remember, Cassie had previously sued him. I went over that lawsuit. It settled the day after it was filed in New York. But this video is from a hotel in Los Angeles from 2016. That assault that is shown on video is also detailed in the lawsuit that settled. There were lots of questions in the chat while this news was coming out, while we were in the middle of testimony in the Karen Read case about what would happen from here. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office put out a statement on Instagram, as one does, that says, "Statement on alleged video involving Sean Combs." Remember, this statement was released before Sean Combs issued an apology. We will talk about that in just a moment. It says, quote, "We are aware of the video that has been circulating online, allegedly depicting Sean Combs assaulting a young woman in Los Angeles. We find the images extremely disturbing and difficult to watch. If the conduct depicted occurred in 2016, unfortunately, we would be unable to charge as the conduct would have occurred beyond the timeline where a crime of assault can be prosecuted, outside the statute of limitations," but said more simply is what they're saying. As of today, law enforcement has not presented a case related to the attack depicted in the video against Mr. Combs, but we encourage anyone who has been a victim or witness to a crime to report it to law enforcement or reach out to our office for support from our Bureau of Victim Services. And that is accurate. It is beyond the statute of limitations for a criminal assault charge, but it can be used if there is federal charges, if they are in the realm of the racketeering acts. Some things can be used as predicate acts, as we talked about in other coverage of Sean Combs and the Fed raid and what they may or may not charge. I am wondering why this video came to light now from CNN and if this is predicating more to come and potentially federal charges related to all the things alleged in the lawsuits. I am interested to see if there will be more movement in any potential criminal charges this week. Cassie Ventura's attorney released a statement to Variety saying, quote, "The gut-wrenching video has only further confirmed the disturbing and predatory behavior of Mr. Combs. Words cannot express the courage and fortitude that Ms. Ventura has shown in coming forward to bring this to light." I can only hope that her or her attorney were given a heads up by media outlets before this was everywhere. There was no escaping this video on social media, which I imagine for victims everywhere, that has been tremendously difficult to not even be able to open a social media app without this video popping up, without looking for it. I hope that she was given the dignity of at least a heads up that this was coming out by CNN. And then on Sunday, May 19th, Sean Combs responded in a video on Instagram. Notably, in that apology, he does not mention Cassie's name, but he does talk about the video, and he says, quote, "It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life, but sometimes you gotta do that. I was fucked up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses." He goes on to say, "My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in this video. They're disgusting. I was disgusted when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought professional help. I've been going to therapy, going to rehab. I had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry, but I'm committed to being a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I am truly sorry. I mean, if there's anyone to ask for forgiveness, it would seem that it would be Cassie, but also the plethora of lawsuits that outlines behavior of Sean Combs that runs the gamut from assault to sexual assault and more. Some of that behavior is as recent as 2022. That video is up on his Instagram. I don't know how long that video will be up on his Instagram, but Variety noted, and I went and confirmed, that his statement from December 6, 2023, about the allegations coming out about him is still up on his Twitter account. And that statement is, quote, "Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth." Signed, Sean Diddy Combs. Of course, the internet works quickly, and there is a community note that says, quote, "CNN has released surveillance footage from the hotel where Sean Diddy Combs is throwing and kicking Cassie Ventura," and then links the CNN video. I also wonder how long that will be up on Twitter. We will see what happens from here, and I will keep you posted in the Law Nerd app. I do not cut away from trial coverage to cover breaking news, but I will also keep you up to date in the quick bits. That's exactly what this is for. So, being quick, let's talk quickly. Emily, there is no quickly about this week. Let's try to talk quickly about week 3 of the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. Hear ye, hear ye. Let's talk week 3. Week 3 started with the cross-examination of Brian Albert Sr., including the fact that he, as I have started to cheekily call it, rehomed his cell phone. It seems that Brian Albert Sr., the homeowner of 34 Fairview, just upgraded his phone the day before the court issued a preservation order. You know, those pesky little don't delete your shit orders. But the phone was upgraded before that. So things ported over from the old phone to the new phone. But of course, without the physical phone, some information is necessarily lost. Lots of the types of information we saw in the Murdaugh trial, when a phone was powered on, when the screen went on, how many steps the phone was taking, at what rate, that type of information. Not text messages and phone calls, but also the base data about whether a text was deleted. Sometimes is much easier to ascertain if you have the physical phone, which is gone. We also heard about the amorous butt dial, and I call it that because Brian Albert Sr. said he didn't call Brian Higgins after 2:20 in the morning. He was getting frisky with his wife, and the phone must have accidentally butt dialed. But there was a 20-second answered call between Brian Albert Sr. and Brian Higgins, according to phone records. But Brian Albert said he didn't talk to Brian Higgins until later that morning. And remember, we've heard from others that Brian Higgins was seen entering Canton PD after 1:30 in the morning. There's a lot more, I think, to come with all of these cell phone records. I can't believe we haven't gotten into it more 3 weeks in, but I wonder if the prosecution's going to skip over it and we're just going to see it in the defense case. The next witnesses, witness 27 and 28, were Brian Albert Jr. and Caitlin Albert. Of course, Brian Albert Jr. had friends over at 34 Fairview, and then everybody came back to that house to wish him a happy birthday. He talked about seeing what is known to be now, based on defense questioning, Karen Reed's SUV outside of 34 Fairview. He said he saw it near the mailbox, and then it moved up closer to the flagpole and beyond because his friend Julie Nagel went outside to talk to her brother Ryan, who had gotten a ride with Ricky, who was going to take Julie home until she decided to stay later. But then she got a ride home with Jen and Matt McCabe. We heard from Caitlin Albert that she was at the waterfall with her parents and got a ride back with them to 34 Fairview to wish her brother a happy birthday. And then ultimately her boyfriend Tristan picked her up sometime around 2 a.m., even though he needed to be up at 3 a.m. for snow removal of some sort or to be on call for that. and he hadn't planned on picking her up. They also got into the nature of her friendship with Katie McLaughlin, the fact that they had traveled to Maine together for a trip. They were on the same track team in high school, even though Caitlin Albert said she had forgotten that until shown a picture of it. And a lot of the photos that the defense say came to their attention because of the internet after Katie McLaughlin's testimony were brought up, and Caitlin Albert didn't deny any of those occasions that they were together and said they are friends with the same large group, but they individually do not have really a one-on-one friendship. They're all friends of friends. On day 11, Tuesday, the cross-examination of Caitlin Albert began. Questions about whether or not she took Chloe with her when she left with Tristan, and whether or not she ever saw John O'Keefe come into the house. Everyone who was at 34 Fairview has testified to some version of no or absolutely not when asked if John O'Keefe came into the home at 34 Fairview that night. Then the prosecution called Tristan Morris, the boyfriend of Caitlin Albert, and the heart of all of his testimony is that Caitlin Albert is kind of high maintenance and he didn't want to hear it, and that's why he went to pick her up at her parents' house because she didn't want to get snowed in there. Why did the prosecution call Tristan Morris? I can't tell you. They also then called Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel, because Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel, who were both going to go home with Julie's brother and then stayed at 34 Fairview, ultimately leaving with Jen and Matt McCabe. Sarah said she didn't see anything when they were leaving 34 Fairview, but Julie Nagel did. She said that she saw, quote, a black blob or a black object near the flagpole as Matt McCabe was pulling away from 34 Fairview. And she said that at the time, she said out loud in the car, I think I see something, or what was that? And her friend Sarah said to her something along the lines of what? And she said, but I don't know, I've been drinking. She then said that that object, when asked by prosecutor Lally, was 5 to 6 feet long. On cross-examination, it became clear that she had never made that statement before, never told anyone that that was a 5 to 6 foot long object or quote unquote black blob. Remember, in the area of the flagpole, there are also quite a lot of bushes and an electrical box. They asked her on cross-examination when she became aware that John O'Keefe was found on the lawn of 34 Fairview, and she said she had put 2 and 2 together, that what she had seen might have been him, but then never stated that in any of her interviews and never told law enforcement, didn't call anyone and say, I think I have information that's helpful. She remained silent about that until asked during this testimony in court. On day 12, Wednesday, May 15th, they called an expert witness out of order who works at UC Davis, who does animal DNA testing. We don't know where the swabs she tested are from. We don't know what shirt they are from. None of that is in evidence yet, but she was sent swabs only. No photos of what was swabbed, no photos of where it was swabbed from, and she was given the instructions to test it for dog DNA. She said that there was no dog DNA found, only pig DNA. I imagine as we get into the expert witnesses, it will become more clear that this must have been the victim's clothing, hopefully where they swabbed it from, and more. At the very end of that testimony, over objection, the defense plowed through their question, as they often do, and asked if the witness was aware that the person swabbing had not passed their proficiency exams. That was quickly sustained, but the question is now lingering for when we get to those who took the swabs of the shirt. And finally, the defense used this expert as an opportunity to ask about the proper procedures for collecting biological material to later be tested, and asked if a solo cup was an appropriate receptacle. The response from the expert was literally, I'm sorry, what? And then they got on to calling Ryan Nagel, Heather Maxson, and Ricky. Ricky is the one who drove, Ryan Nagel is Julie's brother, and Heather is Ryan's ex-girlfriend. All three of them saw the SUV parked outside of 34 Fairview. All of them saw a woman in the driver's side of the SUV, and Heather saw a man in the passenger side of the SUV. None of them saw anything on the lawn, and none of them saw a Jeep parked behind the SUV, which witnesses later in testimony say they saw. Interestingly enough, and I forgot to mention this when talking about Julie Nagel's testimony, Jen McCabe had asked Julie Nagel for screenshots of her text messages asking her brother to pick her up, and she provided those screenshots to Jen McCabe. Why? We don't know yet, but the insinuation was left that Jen McCabe was investigating what happened at 34 Fairview. What stood out to me about the testimony from everyone in Ricky's truck was that none of them were interviewed until after the federal grand jury, not until September of 2023, even though it seems all of them saw the SUV outside of 34 Fairview, and some of them saw the SUV driving to 34 Fairview at the same time they were driving to 34 Fairview after about 12:20 in the evening. The prosecution then called Allison McCabe and ended the day with Colin Albert. Allison McCabe is the daughter of Jen and Matt McCabe. She is the same age as Colin Albert, now a sophomore in college. She gave Colin a ride home from 34 Fairview that night. Though on cross-examination, it's clear that there is a conflict between her testimony and data from Life 360, which is an app you can use, or parents often use, to see where their kids are, how fast they're driving, where they're going. The entire underlying foundation for this data has not come in yet. The reliability of it has not come in yet. But we now know that that data on Allison McCabe and presumably Jen McCabe's phone is something that the prosecution and the defense has, and is something that is going to come up more, because it seems to show that Allison McCabe was not home until an hour after she testified she was. On redirect by the prosecution, she was asked why she didn't think Colin was relevant to the case and didn't mention that she had picked him up. And she said it wasn't until the harassment that they had experienced as a part of this case until Colin really became relevant, and then said Colin wasn't there when John was. Like all things in this case, every statement in this case, I think, has multiple interpretations. None of it is clear. The defense and the prosecution did not follow up on that statement. Colin wasn't there when John was there. Does this mean when John was outside in the SUV? Does this imply that John was inside the house? We know that victim John O'Keefe was at 34 Fairview. It's where he's found the next morning. But the intent behind that statement, the meaning behind that statement, is going to ultimately be left for the jury. And then they got into the beginning of Colin Albert's testimony at the end of the day. So on Thursday, day 13, much time was spent on Colin Albert's testimony and then the beginning of Matt McCabe's testimony. The week ended with Matt McCabe and Jen McCabe testifying. On Colin Albert's direct examination, there was a lot of I don't remember, to the point that the defense actually said, "Do you remember anything about this case?" Which the judge was not thrilled with, but it was what everyone was feeling watching that testimony, I think, because it was a lot of I don't remembers. During direct examination, Colin Albert said that he left when Allie picked him up. He got home around 12:20. He never saw John O'Keefe at the house, never saw the SUV at the house. On cross-examination, it became clear that 10 plus years ago, he was a ring bearer in Trooper Proctor's sister Courtney's wedding. And if this chart is a giant miasma of names that you don't remember, let me help real quick. Colin Albert's aunt, his mom's sister, is best friends with Courtney Proctor, the lead investigator's sister. As all of this was coming out, every witness makes it more clear that Trooper Proctor should not have been the lead investigator on this case. And he hasn't been called to testify yet, so I'm sure there is more to come. The prosecution also introduced a photo from a day or two after the death of Officer O'Keefe that shows Colin Albert with his arms around somebody whose face is scratched out in pen. It's the weirdest exhibit I've ever seen. And he said that that was what he looked like a few days after this, that his brother was home from the Marines and they had a family party, which opened the door for the defense to get into photos of him from February 26, 2022 at a place called Fenway Johnny's with very scraped up knuckles. When the defense asked Colin Albert about that, his memory was restored that in February it was particularly icy and he was out at a friend's house and he had something in his left hand and slipped going up the driveway and caught himself by putting his right fist knuckles down and that they got scraped up on the ice. Defense Attorney Jackson responded with what you're thinking right now and said, seriously. After objection, it was withdrawn, but it is an odd story. It then came out that during another grand jury, we know it to be the federal grand jury, that Colin Albert arrived at that grand jury with knuckles that were scabbed over. And when asked about it, he said he had been hitting a heavy bag without wraps on. It's so curious to me as to why he didn't say that regarding the February 22nd photo, but he didn't. Alan Jackson asked Colin Albert if he had ever been in a fight, and he said he had never been in a fight in his life. That answer opened the door for him to be impeached with 2 videos from social media. They never identified which, but it seemed like Snapchat, where he is threatening to fuck people up and telling them to pull up and telling them that he is essentially going to, KO them, bang, bang. The jury gets to decide what weight to put on that videos, but he maintained he had never been in a fight. And they will be allowed to decide if this is someone who is regularly getting into fights or if this is someone who has a lot of talk and bluster when they are clearly drinking as a teen. He said those videos were from his sophomore year. And then there was an entire wandering side quest about the Advantage Boys Club ice hockey team and the back and forth between Colin Albert and the Advantage Boys Club ice hockey team, because girls in their group were hanging out with guys from that ice hockey team. Keeping in mind, Colin Albert's best friend, Allison McCabe, also plays ice hockey. Why do we know so much about these teenagers' lives and not a lot about what happened on January 28th? I don't know. I'm still surprised the prosecution called Colin Albert at all. I think they should have left it for the defense to do during their case, because Colin Albert's testimony didn't move the prosecution's case forward in the slightest. The next witness at the end of Thursday was Matt McCabe. His direct examination and cross-examination continued into Friday. But first, a thank you to our sponsor for this episode of Quick Bits. During the last week of trial, I was really glad to take a break to go see a concert. And I don't know about you, but going to see live music is one of my favorite things, but it's also a complete workout. I don't know how one sits still at a concert. And I don't know if I've ever been more thankful for my Lume deodorant sponsoring today's podcast, because not only were my arms in the air like I just don't care, but I was jumping around like I was 20 years old. I am not. So I was a hot, sweaty, but not stinky mess. What I love is that Lume delivers 72-hour odor control for everywhere from your pits to your feet and everything in between. If you have not yet tried Lume, I have a great discount for you. New customers get 15% off all Lume products using our exclusive link. Use code EDBQB, like the Quick Bits, at LumeDeodorant.com. That's LumeDeodorant.com. And if you're not sure what products you'll like the most, try their starter kit. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, a cream tube deodorant, and 2 products of your choice, like the mini body wash or the deodorant wipes. And if you get the starter pack, because it's already discounted, that is over a 40% discount in total using EDBQB at checkout. And thank you, Lume, for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to all the wildness happening in court. Matt McCabe's testimony and Jen McCabe's testimony closed out week 3 of this trial. Matt McCabe's testimony during direct examination came across, to me, truthful. He came across as very likable. This is where jurors are often told to keep an open mind, because things will shift during cross-examination. But during his direct, we got into who was at the basketball game and where they sat in the bleachers and every excruciating detail up until Matt McCabe and his wife left the waterfall. And it seems in this case, everything is consistent and clear until about 12:20 in the morning, and then the wheels come off and everything is confusing. But as they were leaving the waterfall, Jen was on the phone, seemingly through the Bluetooth in the car, trying to give John O'Keefe directions to 34 Fairview because he had not been there before. Matt McCabe said he was also talking over his wife, giving directions to John O'Keefe, and then saw the SUV outside of 34 Fairview and testified several times he thought it was weird that no one had come in. He thought it was odd that John hadn't come in yet, and he knew that Jen was texting John asking why he hadn't come in. He also testified that he saw tire tracks that made like a wave in the road near the SUV, that he saw the SUV nearer to the mailbox and a Jeep, and then saw Ricky's truck behind the driveway. This is one of the few witnesses that says that they saw a Jeep outside of 34 Fairview. From other testimony, we know that Brian Higgins that night was driving a Jeep with a snowplow attachment on the front. And it seems that it was parked there, but half the people who looked out the window or were in the truck with Ricky never saw the Jeep. And the day ended on Thursday dramatically with this witness saying he woke up the morning of January 29th to screams in his bedroom. It was clarified when testimony resumed on Friday that his wife was talking to Karen Reed on the phone, and he could hear Karen Reed through the phone screaming, "Jen, Jen, Jen," so loudly he thought someone was in his bedroom, and it woke him up out of a dead sleep. And that was shortly before 5 o'clock in the morning. He also testified that at some point Karen Reed came to their home and was screaming outside, that he told Jen to tell Karen to keep it down because she was going to wake up the whole neighborhood. Interestingly, it seems that the level of screaming Karen Reed was doing that morning didn't wake up the whole neighborhood at 34 Fairview, but Matt McCabe was worried about it. Everyone seems fairly consistent at the level of distress Karen Reed was under in the early morning hours of January 29th. And then in cross-examination, we got into a bunch of group text messages between Matt McCabe, Jen McCabe, Brian Albert, and Nicole Albert, keeping in mind that Nicole Albert, homeowner at 34 Fairview, is sisters with Jen McCabe. Those text messages included details of the police being back out near the neighbor's house at 34 Fairview and conversations about Carrie Roberts and what she may or may not have told police and how thoroughly they may have interviewed her, and a text message about Chris Albert and seemingly Matt McCabe telling the group text to tell Chris Albert to quote unquote ask some questions and say, quote, "Tell them the guy never went in the house," to which Brian Albert responded, "Exactly." And then defense attorney Yannetti said, "We're done here." On redirect, the prosecution asked who them was, tell them the guy never went in the house. And this witness said that them was Channel 4 because they had showed up at Chris Albert's pizza place on February 1st to ask questions. So Officer O'Keefe is found the morning of January 29th. And on February 1st, there are group texts, "Tell them the guy never went into the house." It was surprising to me that the prosecution didn't bring up more context around those text messages. Some, it seems, have interpreted those text messages to mean exactly, they're getting their stories straight. They're trying to cover up that John O'Keefe went in the house. And some interpreted those text messages as exactly, John O'Keefe never went in the house. And this is them saying, don't forget, he never went into the house. Like all of the statements in this case, there are multiple interpretations and nothing seems clear. Matt McCabe said he was talking about Channel 4. We will see what happens, but no one asked Brian Albert or Chris Albert about those texts, which is curious to me. Also, I noticed in the comments on the videos I have done about "tell him the guy never went in the house," because the phrasing of the guy seemed very cold to me. Many from New England said, no, it's colloquial. It's not cold. It's not as shocking or off-putting as others have interpreted it. And this is why we have local jurors, because the colloquialisms, the regional appropriateness, the way that people will talk and text could be interpreted differently based on where you live. And many from New England had said, no, this isn't cold or unfriendly. This is just colloquial. So again, the jurors get to decide if that is everyone getting their story straight or if that is a confirmation that John O'Keefe never went into the house. After all of this testimony, I just want to see the cell phone records at this point. I want to see where the victim's cell phone is. I want to hear what the pathologist has to say. I am waiting to see the evidence that is from the tech. at this point. And then the prosecution got into the testimony of Jen McCabe. Testimony, I'm surprised, didn't go first because it is the first witness that lays out what happened from talking to John O'Keefe as they're leaving the waterfall, John O'Keefe not coming into the house at 34 Fairview per her testimony, to waking up the next morning to Karen Reed screaming that they can't find John, and then to going with Karen Reed to find John at 34 Fairview and everything that unfolded that morning. It was a lot of testimony. She talked very much about the fact that Karen was beyond herself, at times describing Carrie Roberts as saying Karen is batshit crazy, that Karen is screaming and upset and screaming their names and screaming that she has to go to 34 Fairview and screaming, could I have hit him? And saying that they got in a fight and that Karen told her that she left John at the waterfall. And they're saying Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe going back with Karen to John's home. Jen McCabe testified that Karen showed her and Carrie the back of the Lexus SUV and showed her that there was a broken taillight and asking, could I have hit him? Could I have hit him? Though when the prosecution showed her the ring footage, it doesn't look like they paused behind the SUV even for a fraction of a second. She also said that when they arrived on scene, Karen was fighting to get out of the back seat of Carrie Roberts's Explorer and made a beeline to where John O'Keefe was. Jen McCabe testified that she couldn't see John O'Keefe in the snow, that she couldn't see anything, but that it seemed Karen knew exactly where he was. And then Karen laid on him. And from the way she described it, it seemed as if Karen was trying to warm him up, asking them to get blankets, moving snow off of him, that Carrie Roberts was moving snow off of his face, and that they were all in shock. But Jen McCabe testified that she heard crystal clear when an EMT was asking Karen Reed about John's information, your basic biographical information, and asked what happened, that Karen told the EMT, and this was the testimony, quote, crystal clear, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. We know that statement's in controversy. We know that statement's been brought into question with that EMT on cross-examination. But we also know that multiple people have said they heard Karen Reed say, could I have hit him, or I hit him. Jen McCabe also at the end of her direct examination said it was Karen who asked her to Google hypothermia and how long does it take to die in the cold. That cross-examination will begin on Tuesday. Remember, the jury is going to decide what the facts are, but the testimony of Jen McCabe is that Karen and John got into a fight that night, and that Karen says she doesn't remember getting home, that she left him at the waterfall, that she was panicked and frantic before 5 o'clock in the morning, insisting that they had to go back to Fairview. I will be very interested to see the rest of the data, because what we know from the defense opening statement is they are going to be asking Jen McCabe if she was Googling how long to die in the snow at 2:27 a.m., not after 6 a.m. The thing that's clear in this case is that everybody went to the waterfall, that it was snowing, that there were conflicts with Trooper Proctor that seemed to raise questions about this investigation. And I don't know if those questions will be overcome. It seems the prosecution is still grouping their witnesses together, and that we have at least a few more civilians to hear from before maybe we finally get into the investigating officers, a pathologist, how they say this accident happened, because we're not there yet. But Jen McCabe is the first witness to lay out what she says happened, from leaving the waterfall to waking up to Karen screaming to finding John O'Keefe. I imagine this will be quite an extensive cross-examination, so you don't want to miss Tuesday in court. The court is taking the day off on Monday, as am I. Thank you for being here. Thank you for enjoying the quick bits. I know these are a little less quick, but on Wednesday on the Emily Show podcast, I will be covering some updates in other cases that we're covering, and maybe we'll see a ruling from the court on the Alec Baldwin hearing that just happened. And there's quite a lot going on in Utah with Corey Richins. With that, I will talk to you in the next one. Take care of yourself. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.